So my name is RoseAnn Dogas. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist. I have a private practice in Red Bank, and I've been in practice in an RDN. They actually use them interchangeably for a little over 20 years. It's a wonderful profession. It's a helping profession, just like many of you are in as well. The helping professions of really helping individuals to find their optimal and best health. And so we'll just get it started. So the mind and gut connection. So this is an area that is just so much emerging science coming out of here. If you go on PubMed, which is where we go to look for literature, you will literally find thousands and thousands of documents talking about, and research studies talking about, this link between our brain and our gut. And so without any further ado, let's get it started. So how do our nutrition and lifestyle choices affect our gut and our brain health? Well, in many, many ways, and you're about to learn that over the next hour and change. I love this little slide here. The first wealth is health by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Yes, we know that when we have our health, we have everything, because without which, nothing else can really happen for us. So the gut health is brain health. And so the two are intimately related to each other. And we're going to get into not too much of the nitty gritty, but we're going to really give a good broad stroke and really talk about how are these two seemingly disconnected organs connected to one another. And we're going to find out that they're intimately related. And so let's start for a minute just by talking about the digestive system. And so the digestive system really starts with your mouth, right? Your mouth and your teeth, and that grinding of food and the release of actually saliva and enzymes to break your food down is really the beginning of the digestive process. And after we swallow that food, it travels down the esophagus into the stomach. And in the stomach, there is even more digestion that's occurring. The stomach environment is very acid, and so acid is released, and also some digestive enzymes to break down your food further. After that, the food travels. Oh, and of course, there's some accessory organs here. So the liver and the gallbladder, they are not internally in part of that sort of digestive tract, but they're important because they are also releasing some digestive juices to help us to break down our food further. And so then after the stomach, the food starts to travel to that light pink region called the small intestine. After the small intestine, there's even more food breakdown that's happening. It's mostly a chemical breakdown at that point. And there is also some absorption that occurs there at the small intestine. After the small intestine, then the food travels to the large intestine, so that darker pink area, also known as the colon. So while the food is in the colon, this is where a lot of the absorption is taking place, meaning that our food is actually broken down to these tiny, tiny little components and being absorbed through a single cell layer thick wall, those colon cell wall, okay, one cell layer between the inside environment and the outside environment. You can think about a large hose even passing through from the stomach all the way to the backside. There is single cell layer thick at that terminal end. And so this area, the colon, is really what we're going to be talking a lot about today. It is this sort of newly discovered in the last couple of decades area of the body, which is this vast ecosystem called the microbiome. It's called the microbiome. It's also called the microbiota. There's a couple different terms that we'll kind of throw around interchangeably. And so on the right side of your screen, you see the looking glass or magnifying glass. And so it's pointing to this area of the gut, right, or the colon. And it's pointing there, and inside the microscope, you can see what looks like these little blue things. Well, those little blue things are supposed to represent these microbes right, that live inside of this ecosystem. And we are going to do a dive into that ecosystem and really talk about that. And how does this invisible organ really affect our health? So we're going to really get into that and spend a lot of time talking about that. So let's look at this diagram on the right. And so basically what it's saying is, this gut and brain axis, these two things are related to one another. And so the brain can influence certain things in the gut, like motility, which means movement. Okay, so the rhythmic movement of the food through the digestive system. It also can affect secretion, meaning the release of digestive juices to help us to break down our food so that we can get the nutrients out of there, the vitamins, the minerals, the water, etc. Nutrient delivery and the microbial balance. Again, what we're going to spend a lot of time talking about. And then, of course, that gut also influences the brain because of neurotransmitters that are produced in this gut ecosystem. It also can affect our stress and anxiety, our mood, and our behavior. So there's a lot of interplay between these two. So what is this microbiome? And this might be a new word for many people. And so we're going to talk about it, and we're going to sort of break it down to very understandable language. So the microbiome is this ecosystem, this huge ecosystem of different kinds of microbes. Microbes meaning bacteria, funguses, fungi, viruses, and protozoa. So for the most part, I'm probably going to focus a little bit more on the bacteria. And I'm going to use the word bacteria and microbes kind of like interchangeably, just for the sake of making it more understandable. But basically, we've got trillions of these microbes living in this gut ecosystem, in this microbiome. Okay. And so there's actually so many of them that they outnumber our human cells about 10 to 1. Okay. And so we are actually more bacteria than we are human, if you want to think of it from that perspective. So what exactly are these things doing in there? How did it come to be? Well, we've evolved synergistically with these microbes since the beginning of humankind. Okay. And so they're very integral in our health and well-being, and they do a lot of important things for us. And so there's a term that we use called symbiosis, which really means that I scratch your back, you scratch my back, okay? You do something for me and I do something for you, okay? And so these bacteria and other microbes do important things for us, the human, and in return, we do good things for them. We feed them, okay? And so let's talk about, well, what good things could they possibly be doing? Okay. If you grew up in a certain age and era, you actually may have this false impression that all bacteria are bad, right? Bacteria are not good for us. We have to kill those. We have to take something and kind of, squash those down, right? And there are some bad bacteria out there in the world. But the bacteria that live in our gut are mostly good guys. They're mostly all good guys. And so let's talk about, well, what are they doing? So some of the roles that these important microbes play are aiding in our digestion, helping us to break down foods better. Okay. They're also important for the production of vitamins, and specifically activating certain types of vitamins and making them into their active form. They're also important because they're actually the first line of our immunity and looking out for intruders, bad guys, okay? And if anybody's ever had food poisoning, you may know that, you got ill, you got sick, you might have vomited, you might have had, loose bowels, but that was your body's attempt to get rid of that thing before it crossed over that one cell layer into the whole entire blood circulation and made you really sick and you had to end up in the hospital, right? And so that gut immune system is on high alert, and that's what they're doing. And one of the other important roles that we're going to talk about today is that the vast majority, about 75% of our happy, feel-good neurotransmitter called serotonin is actually made in the gut by these gut microbes. And so this is really, really important because now we can really see, well, hey, if those guys are making most of my serotonin, then I really should take care of them and really make sure that they're getting what they need to thrive, right? So, so food, of course, is an important interplay in all of this because what we eat feeds or hurts those gut microbes. So there is a balance between the good and the bad guys. So we're mostly good guys inside there. Okay. And I don't mean to choose a gender for these microbes, but I'm going to call them good guys. There's mostly good guys, about 85% to about 15% of sort of opportunistic ones that could overgrow and cause issues. But they're mostly good guys. And that's what matters. So there's a balance between the two. So things like antibiotics. So antibiotics kill bacteria, alcohol, stress, and a poor diet can disrupt this balance. Now, I want to make a note here. Antibiotics are critically important, okay? They are why humans are living longer and longer because of the advent of antibiotics. So they're critically important, and I'm not telling anyone out there not to use antibiotics when it's prescribed by a doctor and it's medically appropriate, okay? And it should always be used exactly the way it's prescribed by a physician because that actually prevents bacteria from becoming resistant. So it's actually very important that we follow our doctor's instructions exactly. But there is an overuse of antibiotics, and a lot of antibiotics are being used in animals. And so that's where we really need to become more educated and really start advocating and making sure that we're getting as much antibiotics out of the food supply as possible. So when microbes are out of balance, disease can occur, and it does occur. And we're going to talk more about that. I want to talk for a second about alcohol. So I liken this example. We all have just gone through this pandemic, and of course that was a virus. And this virus we know was killed by what? Hand sanitizer, right? And what is hand sanitizer? It's alcohol. So when we drink alcohol, the same thing can happen inside of our microbiome. We can actually kill off some of these good guys. Okay. And so using moderation around alcohol really makes a lot of good sense for a lot of aspects of our health and well-being, but especially as it relates to gut health. Stress also can send signals that disrupt this ecosystem and can kill off some of the good guys. And we're going to talk a lot about how the diet can either help or hinder. So this is interesting. I know that we are not large rats, okay? But we do learn a lot from the studies of animals. And so in this study, they noted that there was some sort of causal relationship, okay, potentially, between the gut microbiota or the gut microbiome and major depressive disorder. What they did was they took a germ-free mouse rodent, okay, and they injected it with the microbiome of a person who had major depressive disorder. And what do you think happened when they introduced that fecal microbiota, so really a stool sample, if you could think of it, of somebody with major depression into the microbiome of this mouse? What happened? These mice, multiple. Well, the mouse started to develop depressive symptoms. So it started eating less. It started to socialize less. It was less involved in, not doing all the things that a mouse would normally do when it's feeling normal. And so that was an interesting study to note that, hey, there's something going on here in the gut that is influencing how we behave and how we feel. And so, of course, they did the flip side, which is putting a healthy person's fecal matter into rodents. And what was the outcome? There was no change in the mouse behavior. And so, again, it just points to, we need to learn more about this. We need to know how is this gut really influencing our behavior? So we know that there is an interconnection between the gut and the brain, right? They're not anywhere near each other, but there are two different types of connections. One is a physical connection by way of something called the vagus nerve. Sounds like Las Vegas, but it's spelled differently. So the vagus nerve. So that is a physical connection. And then there is also a chemical connection. And that chemical connection actually goes by way of something called neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters are basically like chemical signals that go from one place to another and send signals. So in our brain, we have something called neurons. They're like brain cells, and our brain has about 100 billion of them. But our gut also has a whole bunch of these neurons, and there's about 500 million there. So we know that it's got sort of its own neural connection. So another interesting mouse study looked at feeding mice probiotics. Well, what are probiotics? Many of us probably have heard that word before, right? So probiotics are pills that we could take that actually have either bacteria or yeasts inside there that are beneficial for us. So maybe you traveled and you got traveler's diarrhea, and a doctor or someone else, a pharmacist, told you, okay, why don't you take this probiotic and see if it helps? So probiotics are beneficial microbes that we can consume that can change the outcome of how we're feeling. And so what they did is they took mice and they gave them probiotics. So they gave them these beneficial bacteria. And what they saw was that the amount of stress hormone that was circulating in that mouse's bloodstream actually reduced. But what they also found is that when they cut the vagus nerve, the probiotic didn't work anymore. And so we know that there is some interplay going on along that vagus nerve that is really important. So a minute ago, I talked about those two different pathways, a chemical pathway through neurotransmitters, and then a physical pathway through the vagus nerve. So let's talk for a couple minutes about these neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters are a connection, a chemical connection that really help us to dictate how we're feeling and how we're acting. So serotonin is a very popular one. There are many neurotransmitters, but serotonin is a popular one that a lot of us have heard of before. And it really is a neurotransmitter that helps to contribute to the feeling of happiness and well-being, and helps us also to control our body clock. So the vast majority of that serotonin is actually made in the gut by those gut microbes. GABA is another neurotransmitter, and it helps us to feel less fear and less anxiety. So very important neurotransmitter, also made in the gut by gut microbes, some of it. Now, this other thing is not a neurotransmitter, but rather it is sort of a chemical that is released. You can think of it that way. Short chain fatty acids. So short chain fatty acids are these sort of byproducts or chemicals that are made in the gut by the gut microbes. Although they're not neurotransmitters, they can affect the brain and the body in many ways. One of these ways is by reducing appetite. Another way is by helping to form the blood and the brain barrier. Short chain fatty acids, we know, are also involved in helping to decrease total body inflammation. So this is really an important piece, because inflammation is the root cause of a lot of the diseases that we are dealing with today. Anything that is an itis is some form of inflammation. So if it's, arthritis or appendicitis or whatever that itis is, it means that there is some form of inflammation in the body. And a little bit of inflammation is important. We need that. So for example, you fall down and you scrape your knee, and it gets hot and red and a little bit swollen. That type of inflammation is very important, right? Because it's sending body signals that water and blood and nutrients need to go to that site of injury to help to repair it, right? So a little bit of inflammation, very important. But if the inflammation is constant and ongoing and over a period of time, it can cause an imbalance, and it can cause disease in the body. So short chain fatty acids are also important for another reason. The other reason that short chain fatty acids are important is because they are actually the preferred fuel or food for our colon cells, also called colonocytes. So our colon cells, remember that one cell layer thick that's protecting our internal and our external environment, really are looking to consume this as their major food source. The microbes are the ones that are making it, right? So going back to those microbes and really all those important roles. And we know that the integrity or the strength of that gut wall is very important as it relates to preventing disease. So food affects our mood. I think we all know this already. You know, it's this gut knowing that, oh, gee, when I eat those foods, I feel real crummy. And when I eat these other foods, I actually feel really amazing. I have better attention, right? So we all kind of have that gut knowing, you know, about how food can affect us. But yeah, there are certain foods that can affect our production of certain types of neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin and tryptophan. And a dysregulation can lead to mood and energy fluctuations. So poor nutrition is linked to depression and anxiety. Okay. Bad moods can lead to poor concentration, can lead to poor productivity, which can lead to further bad mood. And there was a study in 2015 that showed that individuals who eat between 5 and 7 servings of vegetables per day are happier, more engaged, and more creative. So really cool outcome studies. All right, so what is this little green guy supposed to represent? Anyone know? Yeah, it's supposed to represent our gut microbes. Okay, so these little microbes that live inside of this ecosystem called the microbiome, that's inside the intestines, they need food, right? It's that symbiotic relationship. We heard about what they do for us, right? They decrease our inflammation. They help with our immune system. They make serotonin for us. They activate vitamins. It's like, thank you so much. You're so important. But what in the world can we do for them? What can we do for them? How can we keep them alive so they're doing all these important roles for us? We need to feed them and we need to not kill them off. So what do they eat? It's like the $1 million question, drum roll, right? And so I don't know if that's a spoiler alert right there that this guy is eating salad, but yes, we need to feed them lots and lots of fiber. So fiber is a part of plant structure that for us, we can't extract calories from fiber. And so for a long time, I think fiber was just looked at as, okay, you know, you need to eat your fiber because it helps with your bowel regularity and, you know, blah, blah, blah. But now fiber has kind of upped its rank, you know, on that scale. And now we know that fiber is just so much more than gut regularity and bowel regularity. It is integral in so many different functions, but most of which is really feeding this gut ecosystem, this gut microbiome. And so I said the fiber is part of the plant structure, and we can't extract calories from that, okay? Unlike a cow can eat grass and gain weight. How? You know, because they're able to break down those fibers and those cell walls and pull calories out of them. They have 4 stomachs. We have 1. You know, I'm not a veterinarian, so I can't tell you all the science behind it, but they can use it. We can't. But guess who does use it? Our gut microbes. So our gut microbes see some fiber coming along and they're like, woo, it's party time. Let's eat, let's get it on. So let's think about something like a whole apple. Okay. A whole apple, you chew it, gets down to the stomach, down to the intestine. Some of those natural sugars get absorbed across that intestinal wall and get into the bloodstream. And you've got vitamins and minerals in there, all this good stuff happening, right? And then here comes this undigestible stuff coming along, these plant fibers. And it's like, oh, what in the world is that going to be useful for? And then the microbes see it and they're like, whoa, it's time for us to eat. And so they use those fibers as their fuel. And when they do that, they start to release these different compounds like those short chain fatty acids, et cetera, which give us, the human, all of those benefits. So fiber is very critical. It is a nutrient that is being under-consumed in the United States. We think about 92% of Americans are inadequate in fiber. And what does adequate in fiber mean? Well, the recommendation for women is to consume 25 grams of fiber per day. And for men, 35 grams of fiber per day. And children, it's a little bit different. If anybody has a question about that, I can talk about it later. We can email. But children are a little bit different. It's based on their age. But we do want adults to be eating between 25 and 35 grams of fiber per day. And most of us are getting about 10, 12. If you use any kind of tracking system at all, like MyFitnessPal, you actually can take a look, get curious. Well, how many grams am I eating per day? And then just try to figure out ways, and you will by the end of this webinar, you will be able to figure out ways to include more fiber into your diet. Okay, so what are the foods that have fiber in them? Well, I talked about it for a second ago. I said plant foods, right? So what are plant foods? Fruits. So all whole fruits are going to have some form of fiber. But what happens if you take an apple and you turn it into apple juice? What are you removing? You're removing the fiber. And so you're removing a lot of the benefit of that apple, right? And so we want to really eat our fruits as much as possible and try not to drink our fruits quite as much. Vegetables. So different types of vegetables have different amounts of fiber in them, but all vegetables are good vegetables. There is definitely a variation. There are some that are much higher in fiber content, things like artichokes and asparagus, which is kind of obvious, right? Because that stringiness and that texture that you see in those particular vegetables are actually the plant fibers, right? And then there are, of course, vegetables that have less fiber, but it's important to eat a variety and eat a lot of different types. And if we do, then we're going to meet our needs. Other plant foods that have fiber, beans. So every kind of bean you can think of, black beans, white beans, lentils, chickpeas, black-eyed peas, the whole gamut of legumes and beans. They're all going to have an actual great source of fiber in them. And then things like nuts, so any type of nut you can think of, and seeds. Seeds can be a great way of getting some extra fiber in a very simple, small package. So things like chia seeds, flax seeds, hemp seeds, pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds. All of these different types of seeds are wonderful, and for the most part, they're all a source of fiber. Again, there's a hierarchy. Some have a little bit more than others. So really, these plant foods are integral. They are the way that we're getting fiber into our daily life. What other foods are important as it relates to overall gut health and brain health? Well, we also know that fermented foods are important for our gut and our brain. So the fermentation process is basically introducing microbes into the food. So yogurt or kefir both started out as just milk. And the microbes actually changed that milk into either an eatable, spoonable form like yogurt or a drinkable form like kefir. So that sour taste that's in yogurt or kefir is actually those beneficial microbes that are inside there that give it that sourness. And so there are plenty of other foods that are fermented that also have a good source of these probiotic or microbes inside of them. For example, sauerkraut or kimchi, which is a spicy type of cabbage. These are both fermented foods that are richer in microbes than just eating the plain cabbage alone. So the plain cabbage will give you some microbes, but when we ferment it and it sits and it's refrigerated, and over time, those microbes eat some of those cabbage carbohydrates, and they use that as fuel. And then they sour that cabbage a bit to give it its special taste. And it increases the amount of microbes that are in that item. So any type of fermented vegetables are going to be rich in microbes as well. And there are some others as well. So from soybeans, we have miso and tempeh, natto, soy sauce, tamari. These all have some beneficial microbes as well. If it is a properly made sourdough bread, and what I mean by properly made means that it has a fermentation time. So back in the day when people used to make their own bread, you would have, about 24 hours or so of when that bread would be sitting out, and the microbes from the air would incorporate into the bread, and actually it would cause some rising of that bread. And so a properly done sourdough have some beneficial microbes in it. A popular drink these days called kombucha is also a fermented beverage that has some beneficial microbes as well. We can also get beneficial microbes by taking probiotics. And so there are a lot of different types of probiotics out there. And so I would speak to a healthcare professional about what is right for you and what you're looking for. And if you feel like you're just looking for something broad, choose a probiotic that has a bunch of different types of strains of beneficial bacteria in it. But I prefer to tell people to really try to incorporate more foods that are fermented versus just taking a pill that may or may not have the benefit that you're looking for. And anyhow, we need food for survival, so it may as well be fun, and we may as well enjoy and get the microbes in a way that's enjoyable. So aged cheeses like blue cheese, Gouda, cheddar, these are all going to be sources of probiotics as well. And then on the right side of the screen, you see another word that says prebiotics. Okay, what in the world is a prebiotic? So a prebiotic is really the food for those probiotics or those microbes, right? And so the prebiotic fibers are important, because if we're not giving them those bacteria, those important fibers that they need, then they're not going to grow. So we can swallow a pill, and if we don't feed those microbes, they're not going to take up residency. They're not going to live in us. We're just going to pass them out the other side. Okay, so what are some of these foods that are really high in fiber? Tomatoes, artichokes, onions, chicory, greens like dandelion greens, chard and spinach and collards, asparagus, garlic, leeks. These are really wonderful, very rich prebiotic foods. In the fruits, berries and bananas are wonderful. The more green a banana is, it actually has a little bit more of these, they're not fibers, but they're resistant starches that are also wonderful for the gut microbiome. So if you like your bananas a little bit more on the green side, you're getting a little bit more nutritional bang for your buck. Whole grains. So whole grains are wonderful. Whole oats, whole barley, whole flax seeds, and wheat. These are wonderful sources of prebiotic fibers. They're wonderful for good sources of vitamins and minerals, especially B vitamins. So they're a great thing to incorporate into your everyday. And then legumes, so lentils, kidney beans, chickpeas, navy beans, white beans, black beans. All the different colors are going to give us different types of plant chemicals that are going to make us healthier. And most importantly, give us a great source of fiber. So, so other things that are important to maintain a good gut health and to help us to feel healthier happier, and calmer. So limiting the amount of saturated fats that we're consuming in the diet. So saturated fats are mostly going to come from those animal sources, such as the higher fat cuts of beef and pork, the processed meats like, bacon, pork roll, etc. And moderating your alcohol intakes. So recommendation for a female is maximum 1 serving per day. For male, maximum 2 servings per day. Really, alcohol is going to be something that disrupts this gut. And so really keeping it to occasional use would really be in your best health interest. Avoiding smoking. So smoking also can disrupt this gut ecosystem. And of course, we know it leads to other problems downstream as well. And then limiting intake of highly processed foods. So sugars and preservatives and colors and gums and thickeners, all of these things have a negative impact on the gut ecosystem, right? So the more processed it is, the less health benefits it is going to give to us, the human. So let's use our imagination for a minute and let's think about what could a well-balanced plate look like. And so take a couple seconds and think about what we talked about so far. What would you put on your plate to make this a really balanced out meal that is going to give you a bunch of different types of nutrients that your body needs to thrive? All right, so this is what I generally recommend for most people, okay? Always individualize for the individual, but as a broad stroke, for most people, eating in this way is going to give you health benefits, okay? And so your goal is really to have balance. So half of the plate, vegetables, any kind of non-starchy vegetable that you can think of. Okay. And what are those starchy vegetables? Well, things like corn and potatoes and peas, sweet potatoes, these are our starchy vegetables and they're wonderful, but they go on that lower left-hand portion of the plate under whole grains and starches because they're more like a grain than they are like a vegetable. But pretty much every other vegetable that you can think of can occupy half of your plate. And so it can be beets and greens and string beans, and it could be spinach and cauliflower, broccoli. Really think about the rainbow and the different colors that are in the rainbow, and then think about what vegetables could occupy that plate. And about 1/4 of the plate, some kind of whole grain. So a whole grain means really basically that it hasn't had the fiber removed from it. When they remove the fiber, it actually removes a lot of the benefit. And so you'll even find that foods that are more processed actually have to have vitamins added back. So it's the law. So when we are, for example, pulling the fiber off of whole wheat and we just make it into white flour or just regular wheat flour, we're removing some of the iron, some of the minerals, the B vitamins. And so you'll see on the label where it has to be added back. The government requires that, but we're still not adding back the benefit of the actual fiber part, right? So really important to try to make at least half of your grains per day whole. So what is whole? Brown rice, whole wheat pasta, whole wheat breads and crackers, things like quinoa, whole corn like polenta, amaranth, which is a type of a grain, potatoes and corn and squashes and oats, barley, etc. Those are all your whole grain options, which can occupy about 1/4 of that plate. And then we've got some sort of protein food. So proteins are really important because proteins are the precursor to making most of those neurotransmitters. That's what they're built of. They're built of amino acids, which come from protein. And so they are important. We do need to make sure that we're eating protein-rich foods throughout the day. And where you get your protein, it can come from an animal or it can come from a plant, either one. So fish and seafood, chicken, lean pork, lean beef, eggs, preferably grass fed beef, preferably pasture raised eggs, meaning the chickens ate a varied diet, including having the ability to be on a pasture. And then we've got all of the sources that come from the plant kingdom. So beans and soybeans and any other type of legume that you can think of are all going to be a good source of protein for your body. And nuts as well. Nuts as well give us some form of protein as well. And then from the animal kingdom, we've got things like Greek yogurt and other dairy products, which also do give us some protein as well. So in the middle of the plate, herbs and spices. Herbs and spices are really a powerhouse of something we call antioxidants. Antioxidants are these plant compounds that really help to keep us healthy and happy and really help to decrease inflammation in the body. So we know that these are really important, and they also make the food taste great. So why not incorporate those? Healthy fats. So healthy fats are mostly going to come from plant sources. So nuts and seeds. It's like, oh, wait a minute, I saw that once before. Yes, they have both fat and they have protein too. So they really have a little bit of both, which is great. Avocados, another great source of healthy fat. And then things like olive oil, sunflower oil, and the seeds as well. Sunflower seeds, the whole olive is also a very healthy fat as well. And then on the other side, you'll see fruit. So fruit can be either a dessert or you can have it as part of the meal. If it's a meal where you're not going to eat that much vegetables, maybe it's 1/4 vegetable and a piece of fruit on the other side. So that would be a nice balanced plate and what it could look like. So here are some pictures of balanced meal and snack ideas. So you see an apple with some nut butter and some nuts sprinkled on top and a little dark chocolate on top of that. You see another plate with some rice and chicken, and then it's got half of a plate of vegetables there and some salads and bean options. And then you see a stir fry on the bottom and some yogurt with some granola with nuts in it. So a few different ideas of how we can incorporate these different types of plant foods into our daily life. So some key nutrients for optimal brain function. So the names of these are not really as important as to note that all of these things listed on the left all come from food. Okay. Yes, there is a measuring spoon with pills on it. Okay. And that's the photo that I chose to use. But really, the take-home message should be that we don't always have to get our vitamins and minerals from a pill. In fact, your body would be much, much happier and knows what to do with food before it would know what to do with something that was synthetic or made in a laboratory. And so beta carotene, which is really just vitamin A. So any kind of orange fruits or vegetables are going to be a good source of this, like sweet potato and cantaloupe. Choline is actually a type of vitamin that comes from eggs, and that is wonderful for brain health. Flavonoids are plant compounds, and they come from all different types of plants and herbs. Iron can be found both in meats, and it also can be found in things like nuts, and beans are a great source, and cereal as well. So like cereal grains, meaning oats and the like. Lutein, magnesium, these are, magnesium is a mineral. It is plentiful in things like greens, nuts, seeds, pumpkin seeds specifically are a wonderful source of magnesium. Really important for the feeling of calm. And so magnesium is very critical, and it really can help us with the feeling of calm and relaxation and sleep. Omega-3 fatty acids. So omega-3 fatty acids are essential. Essential really means that our body cannot make this particular kind of fat. And so we need it because it's important for lowering the inflammation in our body and in our brain. And so omega-3 fats is something a lot of us are not getting enough of. If you eat fish, salmon is a wonderful source, and so are sardines, a wonderful source of omega-3 fatty acids. If you don't, then walnuts and chia seeds and flax seeds can be a wonderful source of omega-3 fats for you. Phenylalanine is just a type of amino acid. So if you're eating protein, you're going to be getting some of that. Selenium is a mineral. It is plentiful in Brazil nuts specifically, but it's present in other nuts as well. And then your vitamins. So vitamin A, vitamin C, D, E, and K. We are going to be getting all of these vitamins if we're eating a varied diet. So if we're eating different types of fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, and proteins from various sources, we're going to be getting all of those. And then you've got all of your B vitamins. Your B vitamins are really the ones that are giving you energy and making you feel energized and enthusiastic. So for the most part, we don't store our B vitamins, except for a little bit of B12. B12, we do store a little bit, but the other Bs, we really don't have a storage place for those. And that means that we need to eat those daily. And again, that is going to be coming from your whole grains. It's going to be coming from your plant food sources like fruits and vegetables as well. B12 specifically, if you're eating a completely exclusively vegan diet, it is very difficult to get B12, and you would be advised to reach out to your healthcare provider or your registered dietitian to learn how to get a proper B12 supplement for you. And then zinc. Zinc we know is important in modulating that immune response, but it's important for so many other roles in the body. And zinc is found plentifully in lots of different types of meat sources, as well as shellfish. And also zinc can be found in things like beans. So some good sources there. Okay, so we kind of went through a lot of this already. So the omega-3s we talked about and how they're important in brain function and where to find them. Antioxidants, I did put this word out there. Antioxidants, you can really just think about as the body's way of putting out little fires. And so inside the body, we can have things kind of go awry. And in fact, they do all the time, but our body has all these different stop gaps that prevents things from getting really crazy and out of control. And so one of the things that the body can do to kind of quell these little fires that can erupt is by using antioxidants in the body. So antioxidants kind of can put that fire out of inflammation and kind of keep everything really calm and normal. So antioxidants are very important, and you're going to get lots and lots from eating foods like berries. So broccoli and leafy greens, rich in vitamin K, which is very important for blood clotting, very important also for bone health as well, and brain health. Also, broccoli contains vitamin C, it has choline, and it's wonderful for overall health and well-being. So nuts and seeds, we talked about some of the benefits there. They also give vitamin E, which helps to boost energy and brain performance. Avocados gives you fiber, healthy fats, vitamin K, folate, and really helps with improving brain performance. Eggs and choline, we did talk about that, but we didn't say that actually eggs can improve memory and your speed and your reaction time. So there is an active ingredient called choline that is plentiful in something like an egg. Green tea. So green tea has lots and lots of different types of antioxidants in them that help to support our memory. And so if you don't love green tea, maybe taking that green tea and icing it instead. In fact, you can take a green tea bag and put it right into your water bottle, and you can, you don't even have to boil it. You can actually put it right in there, and it can release all of those wonderful antioxidants into that water. You can put some fruit in there, lemon, some mint, do what you like to it to make it really taste the way that you would like. So dark chocolate is actually wonderful for giving us a mineral called magnesium, which we talked about is related to stress or helping with stress because it prompts relaxation. It helps the muscles to relax. It helps with sleep. So dark chocolate is a great source of that. So if you don't already have some cacao at home, cacao is just the powdered form of dark chocolate. It's very low in calories, but it gives all that delicious chocolate taste without all of the extra fats that are in, say, a chocolate bar. So dark chocolate in the form of cacao is a great way to make your oatmeal taste better, or you could mix it into yogurt. It's really a delicious food that can be incorporated into your daily life. So olive oil, rich in polyphenols, which are really basically another type of plant compound that helps with lowering inflammation in the body. And brown rice, it has magnesium, and it has plenty of other minerals that help to improve cognitive health. So a few things that are can negatively impact our either gut microbiome or our brain health. So a little bit of caffeine is okay, but too much definitely disrupts our sleep for most people. Now, people metabolize caffeine at different rates, but for the average person, it takes about 8 hours to get half of that caffeine out of your body. So say at noon, you're like, I need a pick me up, and you decide to have a 20 ounce of a coffee. Well, 8 hours later, around 8 p.m., it's as though you drank another 10 ounces of coffee at that time, because you still have about half of that caffeine floating through your system. And so really think about your night's sleep. If you're an adult, you should be getting between 7 and 9 hours per night. If you're not, your brain is probably not functioning optimally. Okay. And we know that people who get less than 6 hours of sleep per night are really at risk for a host of different types of diseases and issues with their health. And so really looking at and examining your caffeine intake and maybe playing around with that a bit and decreasing that and see, hey, do your own experiment. Does this really help me to get a better night's sleep if I decrease the amount of caffeine that I'm consuming? So coffee is obviously a big one that really has most caffeine, but energy drinks, diet sodas and regular sodas, if they're a cola, they do contain caffeine. Chocolate has some caffeine as well, and so does tea. So there are caffeine in other places, but it's important to note that if you're not getting that optimal 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night, then you really may want to look at the caffeine intake and see if there's something you can do about that to get a better night's sleep. So sugary drinks, sugary foods, sugar feeds the bad bacteria. Remember, I said there's a balance, right? And so sugar can feed those bad guys, and they can actually make them increase and multiply. We don't want that. So really keeping sugar at a minimum is important. We want to really be focusing on decreasing the amount of added sugar. So added sugar is literally what it says on a food label. Okay, it will say total sugars, but underneath total sugars, it will also say added sugars. And so added sugars is what you want to look at. And if you're a female or a child, less than 24 grams per day. And if you're a male, less than 36 grams per day is what you want to aim for. And so just as a reference point, most colas, 12-ounce can will have about 40 some odd grams of added sugar in there, right? So if you're consuming even one soda per day, whether you're a male or female or a child, you're either having your beyond your full day's allotment, or you may be having close to double the amount of sugar that is considered healthy for your body. So important to just get curious, look at the label and see how much added sugar is there. So some inflammatory foods that can damage the brain are things that are fried in inflammatory oils. So things like French fries, donuts, fried foods, these are fine to use in moderation, but if this is the foundation of what we're eating every single day, let's just figure out how we can get less of those and more of those whole sources of food that are going to give us more health benefits. So healthy fats, of course, are wonderful. We already talked about that. Avocados, olives, seeds, nuts, wonderful for the body. So those are important forms of healthy fats that we want to be consuming more regularly. So of course, things like candy, chocolate, desserts, those fall into the sugar category. You're going to feel worse after consuming those, and you're going to, potentially have low energy. So alcohol, we already talked about that. The role of alcohol in the gut, it disrupts that gut ecosystem, right? It kills off some of those good microbes. Okay. We also know that alcohol impairs our judgment. So it can lead to either poor food choices. It can lead to just poor decisions overall. So really being moderate around that. And of course, we all know that the liver is the organ that needs to get rid of alcohol. It is a toxin. And so the liver's job is to get rid of anything that is a toxin in the body. And so that is important that we really keep that as low as we can. So some key tips. So eating a balanced meal and balanced snacks that have some protein, some carbohydrates that have fiber, and some form of healthy fats. So really trying to look at that plate and say, hey, does that look like the plate that we, made here together today? Does it look something like that? And if it doesn't, what could I add to that? Could I add some celery, some carrots? Could I add a piece of a few slices of apple? Could I add some beans? What can I do to make this a little bit more balanced? So eating at regular intervals. So, eating regularly throughout the day and really paying attention to that hunger and fullness cue that our body and our brain gives us. Avoiding large meals, right? Because really having large amounts of food can really disrupt our energy level, right? If we have a large meal, oftentimes we feel like we need to go take a nap afterwards, right? And so what else? Focusing on having a high fiber intake, so 25 to 35 grams per day. And really taking a look at what am I eating today and what can I do? What little step, what one thing could I do differently to add a little bit more fiber into my daily diet tomorrow? So minimizing caffeine, minimizing sugars, trying to really eat most of our meals earlier in the day, because large meals before bed can disrupt our sleep. And sleep is so critical as it relates to brain health. While we're asleep, our brain is taking out the garbage, quote unquote, and it is filing away memories, and it is doing all of these important functions that are just so critical for our overall health and well-being, and especially our brain health. And I didn't even mention once today, but hydration is paramount. Being well hydrated is one of the most important things that you can do for your brain and for your body right now today. For the most part, we generally tell people, take your body weight and cut it in half. So say you are 150 pounds, half of 150 is 75. Try to drink 75 ounces of water every single day. If you're 200 pounds, it would be 100 ounces of water per day. Okay, that is a great place to start and see how you feel. If your urine is nice and light in color and dilute, you are on the right track. But if it is dark and yellow and orange and mucky looking, then perhaps you need more fluid. Although some vitamins do make and change the urine color, and so do some medications. So that's not an absolute fact what I said, but it absolutely gives you some guide if it's not influenced by either medications or supplements. And so in recap, the benefits of eating well, it improves our focus, our concentration, and our creativity. We improve our mood. We improve our energy. We improve our stamina. We can actually get improved sleep depending on what we eat and what we drink. It helps us to maintain a healthy weight, and it also can reduce the risk for illness and disease. So these are all the benefits of taking care of yourself and really trying to create more balance in your daily diet. Thank you so much, everyone. That concludes our main presentation, and I am ready to hear any kind of questions or comments that you may have. about what you heard about today.
Well, thank you, RoseAnn. This was wonderful. Certainly incredibly educational and interesting. We do have some questions. Marie, do you want to?
Sure. Good morning, everyone, and thanks again for joining us. And thank you, RoseAnn, so much for this wonderful, wonderful presentation. We really appreciate it. So right now we have about 3 questions. So I'll start with the first one. So first question is kind of a common question. Steaming or cooking vegetables versus eating them raw. Is it safer to kill any pesticides by cooking them despite maybe losing some nutrition of cooking? Is that the case? Question mark.
Okay, so that is an awesome question. So the first thing that I'd like to say is that most of the pesticides that are being used in conventionally grown crops actually can be washed away. So if you are washing your fruits and vegetables very well in water, that will be enough to get rid of most of the pesticide residues. To my knowledge, cooking does not affect those pesticide residues. I can circle back and make sure that I told you the right thing, but to my knowledge, that does not affect it. But certainly washing with water does. We don't need those fancy sprays. If you feel like you need a little extra something to scrub, like a potato, for example, you could put a little bit of salt on it, or you can put a little vinegar in the water if you wanted to. But really, just plain old water has been shown to do the job of ridding most of those pesticides. Now, we should choose organic when we can, and sometimes we can, meaning the cost is not so, prohibiting the purchase of organically grown produce. The other thing that I'd like to note is that farmers markets are actually a great place to get vegetables and fruits that oftentimes are grown either organically or they're grown with minimal amounts of pesticides. But oftentimes the farmer cannot get that certification because to get certified in organic costs something. And so if the farmer doesn't have the means to go out and seek that organic certification, he may be doing everything in his power to grow organically, but he may not by law be able to call himself organic. And so actually, I'm glad that the comments about food markets and farm markets came up, because there is an organization called CARC, and they're located in Asbury Park. And this summer, every Tuesday in Keyport at the Keyport Elks Lodge, there is actually a farm market where there is, correct me if I'm wrong, Marie, but free produce?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So wonderful segue for that. So go and patronize your local farm market to get these wonderful fruits and vegetables.
So I'm going to segue to another question, and we have a few, so we're going to do our best to get to everyone. And if anyone has anything, just please reach out to us. But what are some ways for people with limited access to healthy food choices try to be healthier, especially due to the current limits in finances, or maybe being able to get out, and also because they're very stressed out also, and it's harder for some people. What are some ways that we can maybe guide people in helping others?
Yes. So that's a great question. And one of the ways that I would suggest to really improve the diet quality of people that are on limited income would be really to find those lower cost sources of good nutrients. And so what I mean by that is very inexpensive, but very high in nutrition content, things like black beans, garbanzo beans, lentils, split peas. I mean, these foods are wonderful, very high in nutrition content, but very inexpensive. And so a bag of any of those that I just mentioned is certainly less than $3, but oftentimes it's even less than that. And so those are wonderful sources of very good, high quality proteins and other vitamins and minerals as well. And then your other whole grains are also relatively inexpensive. And so things like brown rice, wheat berries, which is actually where wheat comes from. It's the whole grain, barley, oats. These are all pretty inexpensive food items that are very high in nutrition. So as it relates to fruits and vegetables, I agree, fruits and vegetables can be pricey. And so using frozen can be extremely helpful. And sometimes, I get some eye rolling and I mention frozen vegetables, for example. Oh, are those as good? They are, because there is, think about it, if you're the broccoli grower and you have a field of broccoli, you know already what's going to be done with that broccoli. It is either going straight to the market fresh, or it's going straight to the manufacturing plant to be flash frozen and packaged and sent to the consumer. And so sometimes frozen rather, is fresher than fresh, because if it is a fresh broccoli that is grown in, say, California, and it has to make its way to New Jersey, that is, of course, going to take some time. So frozen vegetables can be really fantastic to help to really fill in the gap, because they are less expensive. For the most part, they are less expensive. Now, also buying in season helps. And so, for example, blueberry season in New Jersey, we're one of the biggest producers, actually. So go Jersey. Blueberries season just commenced, and blueberries over the last couple of weeks have been very inexpensive. And so eating in the season is both better for our body, because that fruit or vegetable is allowed to stay on the vine and ripen longer, which gives it more nutrition. And it is also most economical to eat in season. So something like zucchini right now, which are plentiful, maybe even we have a neighbor who's looking to get rid of some zucchini, is a wonderful food that can be very cost effective to eat this time of year. Same thing with corn. Corn is very inexpensive this time of year. Why? Because we're growing it right here in our backyard. And so trying to eat seasonally will also help as well. And then as it relates to some of those animal proteins, something like an egg, although the prices did go up on eggs, they are still one of the most nutritious foods that we can eat and the most cost effective. And so that would be a few tips on how to really do that. And of course, reaching out to those resources that are available there in your community at low and no cost to us.
That's wonderful. I'm going to combine two questions because we have a few questions coming. So I'm going to some of them I'm going to group. So feeding off of what you just answered. Ha ha ha. Sorry, I had to do it. What about milk? And do canned beans and products holds their nutritional value? I know you answered part of that, but because a lot of the people that a lot of us work with, a lot of it is canned food that they get from pantries and things like that. Yeah. So milk and canned fruits, vegetables, nutritional value.
Great. So canned, yes, is just as nutritious as eating the ones that you have to boil and spend an hour softening. They are absolutely just as healthy. So there is no disadvantage to doing that. Now, if you are watching your salt intake, rinsing those will help to decrease some of the salt in there. But if you are watching your salt intake, then that is just something to be aware of. And if there is an option of doing a salt-free, then of course you could choose that as well. But canned beans are just as healthy as boiling them yourself. So that's not an issue. And then milk. So milk is a food that most of us do tolerate, but there is a subset of the population who doesn't do well with milk or milk products. And I recognize that. And so if you are one of those people who does not tolerate either milk or cheese or yogurt or any other dairy products, then certainly using things like some of those plant-based milks like almond milk, there's flax milk, there's coconut milk. There are a host of different types of plant-based milks that are going to be fortified, which means they're adding in things like vitamin D and calcium, so that it is trying to mimic it, soy milk also, mimic and make it as close nutritionally as what milk is providing. But if you are a person who tolerates milk, using some fermented milk products is a wonderful way to get both the protein, the calcium, but also add in some of those beneficial microbes that are going to be in that fermented food. So things like yogurt or kefir or aged cheeses are going to give you a little bit more of a benefit than just a glass of milk, but there's nothing wrong with drinking a glass of milk. It's a great source of protein, wonderful for young people, especially athletes. It's a wonderful sort of like recovery drink because it's got protein, it has calcium, it has minerals, which we need after we sweat. We need to replace those things.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, just a few more. What does the bacteria look like with excess fiber? This person finds some days that they get about 60 grams of fiber. They know the physical side effects aren't great, but what does the gut health look like?
I've never heard that question posed before in terms of what happens to the gut microbes. For sure, if we eat an excessive amount of fiber, there can just be a ton of the microbes eating and eating and eating, which when they eat, I didn't really explain this very well, but they actually release some gases. There's some fermentation sort of that happens within the gut. And so sometimes if we eat a lot of fiber, especially a lot of fiber really fast, like say tomorrow, instead of going from 12 grams today to just adding one extra high fiber food tomorrow, you were like, nah, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to do the whole kit kat and caboodle. And you're like, I'm eating 3 cans of beans and I'm going to eat nuts and seeds and the whole 9 yards, right? Your belly and your gut will probably be unhappy. You are going to get a lot of gas. You may even have some distension in the gut. You may have a little bit of pain. Okay. So we definitely want to go low and slow as it relates to increasing fiber, a little at a time. That is how we best tolerate and best handle the increase in fiber. Now, is there a negative to the amount of microbes? Can we grow too many microbes? Never heard that question before, but it's a great one. My gut answer, my gut feeling is that no, because most things in our body have a feedback loop. And I would assume that, the bacteria could never grow to the point where they are growing beyond what they can handle for themselves, if that makes sense. But I don't actually know the true answer. So I'll have to circle back on that. But my gut feeling is that you can't really do too much. As long as your body is physically tolerating it, you should be fine.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, I love this question. This person wants to know if they process caffeine at a different rate because they're a social worker. Because they'd like to think that is the case.
I love it. I love it. So, I'm not aware if there is a test that we can do to find out how fast do I get rid of caffeine in my body. I know that there can be some genetic variants that affects the speed at which you get rid of caffeine. That I do know, but I don't know if there's an actual test that you can do. But it's a great question. Now, I would say that for most of us, if we are having effects that could be related to caffeine. So what are those effects? I'm anxious, I'm irritable, I feel nervous, I'm sleepless, I'm restless. So if I'm having those type of symptoms in my day-to-day life, I would take a look at that caffeine, okay? And I would slowly, okay, because if we stop caffeine right away, we know what the effects are: headache, irritability, feeling terrible. Sometimes it brings on migraines in some people. So really, we want to be super careful with that and just slowly back it up and be your own N of one, be your own experiment. What happens if I? So, getting curious about how your body responds to certain variables, like what happens if I do this? What happens if I do that? That curiosity really can help us to learn more about our body. And ultimately, we are the boss of our body. Okay. We can go and we can seek help from dietitians and from doctors and social workers and every other discipline under the sun. But ultimately, you are the person who has resided in your body for however many years you've been on this earth. Okay. You know your body the best versus anybody else. And so getting curious and just saying, hey, what happens if I add this fiber? What happens if I decrease that caffeine? How do I feel? And monitor yourself. Be your own experiment. I think that's really the best thing that we can do for ourselves.
Thank you so much.
Well,
Here's a very important question. Not that they all aren't, but this is something I wasn't thinking of. Any tips or thoughts for nutrition for youth with Prader-Willi syndrome? Do you know of any link for professionals with nutrition for people with this syndrome? Thank you.
yes, for sure. So our organization is called eatright.org, and there are definitely dietitians who specialize in Prader-Willi. Absolutely. So
Wonderful.
eatright.org is where you can find all the registered dietitian nutritionists across the country. So no matter where that child lives, you have access to a dietitian who can help.
Wonderful, thank you. We're almost done. This person's asking, what about the environment when you are eating?
Ah, wonderful question. See, I love this link between our disciplines, dietitians and social workers, because this is really a lot of your domain, which has kind of come into my domain as well. So how does where we eat and who we eat with, how does that affect all of this? Great. I mean, I could spend probably an entire webinar just on this topic alone.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, it's a really cool topic, and it's a really interesting whole area of nutrition. Really, so how does where we eat, who we eat with, how fast we eat, what we're doing when we eat, how does all of that play into our overall health, well-being, our gut health, etc. They are so intimately related. They're intimately related because we know that when we eat while we're distracted, for example, we know that we eat about 25% more when we're eating distracted. Okay. And this feeds back into that try not to overeat category and how that makes us feel, overtired, overstuffed can lead to, a bunch of different things. So paying attention and being in the moment and using mindfulness strategies as it relates to your eating occasions is one of the best things that you can do for yourself. Taking some nice deep breaths before you start eating, having some rituals around eating really is one of the most wonderful practices that you can do. So we didn't get into the different nervous systems in the body. We've got these two different nervous systems, this fight or flight, nervous system. And then we have this rest and digest nervous system. And so they're called the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems. But these two nervous systems are constantly at play in the body. Okay. So if we are activated, right? So we're at our computer and we just got a nasty email or a phone call from, somebody who's upset and angry, or, whatever the case is, something that is putting us on high alert, that is stressing us out. Okay. And then we eat something. Our body is not going to handle that food the same way as if we were calm and centered and focused and paying attention. Okay. Because when this sympathetic nervous system is activated, we're just in, we're in this mode of, I got to solve this problem. I gotta run from this tiger. I gotta, do something here. Okay. So it actually shuts off to some extent this whole other nervous system. Okay. So that rest and digest is on the back seat, really, because we got this problem to deal with. There's a tiger here, right? And so it is really important for us to try to separate the two. And so even if you have to eat at your desk, close your computer. Okay. You're worth 10 minutes. Close your computer. Take a few nice deep breaths. Why? Because that is how we tell our body that everything is fine. Relax, calm down, and activate that rest and digest nervous system, right? So a few nice deep breaths really can do a lot to give your body the signaling that it's time for food. And smelling the food, looking at the food, that actually sends signals, okay? The smell of food helps to cause salivation. Saliva has digestive enzymes. And so seeing the food visually also starts the peristalsis, which is that rhythmic movement in the gut. And so giving our body the signal to calm down and it's time to eat can really, really positively affect how we digest that food. I think there's no better example of this than our clients out there who have irritable bowel syndrome. And irritable bowel syndrome is just that. It is a bowel that is angry. And sometimes these folks have diarrhea, and sometimes it's constipation, and sometimes it's a mixture, and it's bloat, and it's distension, and it's pain. And it is one of the conditions that is oftentimes dismissed because there's not a lot that we can do from a medical standpoint. But there is a ton that a registered dietitian can do, and a therapist. In fact, cognitive behavior therapy is one of the modalities to treat IBS. So there is a ton that these two disciplines can do to help to help that person with IBS to really feel their best. And so calming down, centering, relaxing prior to meals, and really trying to be in the most undistracted environment. And that's not to say you shouldn't sit and eat with a coworker and chit chat. Keep it light, but that's fine. The community aspect of eating is actually wonderful for us. But just being on electronics and being zoned out or answering emails and stuff like that, it's not doing the most optimal thing for our digestive health and digestive well-being.
I unfortunately do a lot of that, so I will definitely take your advice.
Well,
Okay, for the sake of time, I won't even, please. And I know we all do it. Everyone who's on here, I'm sure, is eating lunch and trying to get that last bit of work done.
And Marie, so to that point, right? Because when we're talking with clients, we always want to focus on SMART goals. What's real, what's reasonable, what's attainable, what's achievable, right? So maybe if it's not every meal, maybe it's one meal. Maybe it's just starting with dinner, not in front of the TV, dinner with somebody we love, or if we're eating alone, that's fine too. Be with yourself and just be with that meal and enjoying that food, right? So maybe it's just one of those 3 meals that you're eating, or maybe you start even with a snack, right? So just one of those. So start small and then build your way up.
No, exactly. Thank you. All right. So for the sake of time, I have about 3 quick questions and then 2 comments. So the comment that will feed, again, I used it again, off of what you just said. So I'm going to do that. I'm sorry. We all know how I roll. This one person said that she just wanted to share that most religious practices have rituals before a meal, like saying grace. So that is something that, definitely helps with all of this. And also that centering and helps to calm us down with the mind-gut connection.
Gratitude to the farmer, gratitude to the higher power, right? Gratitude for maybe the person who prepared the food, right? So that gratitude piece we know goes such a long way. And you're right, absolutely. Let's take some guidance from those spiritual practices. Because many of those are long-lived populations of people with these nice, deep-rooted gratitude for food and for how it got to us.
No, that's beautiful. Exactly. There's one question I'm going to answer. Dustin and I both, went over this just to make sure. Someone asked where they can get a copy of the QA questions from this meeting. We can't give out the questions and answers. However, you will get a copy of the recording, the link for this. This has been recorded. So all this information will be available for you after we are done, and Dustin does the magic that she does after the webinars to get us all back centered together and to make sure you get the information that you need. Okay, so last two questions and then a comment. And if anyone has any other questions, I'll make sure that I gather them for Dustin, and we'll, find a way to get the answer to you. Okay.
Sure.
This one is, do you have a suggestion for caregivers whose children who may have a child with autism who's a picky eater or has sensory challenges? And they also said, thank you.
Yes. Yeah, that's definitely an area where a qualified registered dietitian can help tremendously because those young people with sensory issues, absolutely, there's texture aversions where, certain foods and or the food texture, or maybe it's the color, et cetera, don't want to be consumed. And so that is absolutely a challenge of, a caregiver of someone who has autism. So yes, so seeking some professional help with that certainly is helpful. A few hints or tips that I could give to you today would be really, to look at what is the child eating right now, and how could we upgrade the nutrition in that specific item. So let's say, for example, it's only chicken nuggets. Maybe we can make them homemade. Maybe we can change the breading. Maybe there's some ground flaxseed inside the breading. Maybe we can use real whole egg in there so that there's a little extra nutrition. Again, if it's only French fries, let's maybe try to do some sweet potato fries and make some small swaps that, could be helpful. Oftentimes with children, depending on the functional level of this specific child, giving the child some sense of autonomy can help. So empowering them, if able, to make some food decisions. So bringing them to a farm, bringing them to a farm market, letting them touch and see and feel, and then maybe even taste some new foods, letting them help in the kitchen if able. Again, maybe it's just washing the produce. Maybe it is peeling garlic. Maybe it is with a butter knife, mashing up or cutting up fruit, right? So really trying to get that child engaged, if able, with the cooking process can really help to start taking down that wall of sort of fear around trying new foods. So really looking at what is the child eating right now? What little tweaks can I make to upgrade what's happening here? So something like, if it's only mashed potatoes, adding some pureed cauliflower into those mashed potatoes, right? Using some baby foods or your own purees to add some extra nutrition into the foods that are already being eaten. If it is a smoothie, what else can we add into that smoothie to really upgrade? Can we add avocado? Can we add frozen cauliflower? Could we add some other types of fruit? Could we add some seeds in there? So really looking at what are the safe foods, and what can we add in to upgrade those safe foods? And then how can we gain interest around maybe some new foods as well?
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This individual is asking, where can they find a registered dietitian? How can they?
Great. You can go to eatright.org. That will give you all of the registered dietitian nutritionists in your area. That would be the first place I would say to go. We dietitians often specialize in different areas. And so oftentimes right there at Eat Right, you will see some specialties You also can go through your insurance carrier. So let's say, for example, you have Blue Cross Blue Shield. You can call Blue Cross Blue Shield and you can ask them who are the registered dietitians in my area. Oftentimes that insurance person will actually do a little bit of legwork for you. I oftentimes do get phone calls asking me if I see certain types of clients or specialize in certain areas, if certain types of disease processes and things like that, so they're a wonderful resource as well. Your therapist may have access to someone that they know. So that's also a good resource. Your doctor may have a dietitian that they often refer to. So there's a few different avenues there, and all of those are going to be a good avenue. And then just call and talk to that person and make sure that they're the right fit for you, because not every two people jive with each other. So call and make sure that they'll talk with you and you tell them what's happening with you and what your goals are. And then that person really feels comfortable that they're the right fit for you and you feel the same way.
Okay, so now I just to wrap it up, we have just comments real quick. This person asked me to share with you that they feel it was an outstanding presentation. Thank you for sharing this information with our community. You touched on information most conventional medicine practitioners don't talk about. It's wonderful that this information is making it to the general public and not just those who follow natural healing. Then I have a person who said, excellent presentation, very knowledgeable and thorough presenter. This person wanted to share, there are organic greens mixes to add to smoothies and you won't taste them either. And very, very last question. And then, like I said, anything else we'll gather to get back to you, okay? So this last question is, any schooling or programs you'd recommend if someone wanted to go into the field of nutrition and mental health, both for clients and also peers?
Yeah, there is an area, I'm not super familiar with it, but there is an area called nutritional psychology. I think it's a fairly new field, but there are some YouTubers that I follow that is their area of expertise. Very fascinating, very interesting. I'm assuming that it is, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it might be a PhD level program. I believe that it is, you need a PhD, I think, but I'm not 100% sure. But very fascinating, very interesting field of work that I think is sort of on the new side. So registered dietitians, we require 4 years undergrad, and then now it's a master's program as well, and some supervised practice. And so if you wanted to do that and concentrate on, say, eating disorders or other areas, specialties, we certainly can do that. And as I said, that's a master's level program. So yeah, that's what I know. I could do a little legwork and get back to you in terms of that other field. But I believe that's what it's called.
Thank you so much. So on behalf of all of us, I know Dustin's going to close us out. Someone just said, amazing presentation. Thank you for sharing your time and talent. And I'm sure many of us agree with the same sentiment. So thank you so much. And I know Dustin will close us out. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Yes, RoseAnn, thank you so much for taking the time. We could see how interesting or how much people are interested in this topic just based on the number of questions you just answered. So this is certainly a topic that people are eager to know more about, and we just thank you for volunteering your time. Let me remind, RoseAnn has volunteered her time to be with us today, and we very greatly appreciate it. And as Marie shared, we will be sharing the recording of this webinar for all of you that were in attendance today. So you can be on the lookout for that. I would try to get it to you by Monday. And if you, any of the attendees today have ideas for future topics, feel free to reach out to Marie or myself. You will all have my email address, and we will certainly take those into consideration. and wishing you all a happy and healthy weekend.